Hi, this is Darryl Pereira. I am also known as Caged Ether on Twitter, and you can find me blogging at cagedether.com. And now for my day job, I am involved in social business at IBM. And today, I'm just going to take you through what are the roots of social business? Where does this come from? I'll share with you. We'll go back in time and we'll take a look at how business has changed over time and why social business is important. Now, if you want to keep along with the conversation here, I encourage you to use the hashtag SocBizS. SocBizS. So let's get started. Now, if we think back, we can say that commerce used to be more personal. Let's think back to here in the US, if we think back to the Midwest, a period maybe the 1850s or the 1870s, a time where there were high streets developing across the US. Largely they were single streets. Different shops such as a barber shop, general store, you may have butcher, tailor, etc. And for each of these shops, they would have their own specific owners. There would be one high street. You'd have folks that would wander up and down. Maybe it's a small village that would be in the surrounding area. And then around them, I'm sure you can conjure up images from Westerns and other films of, just being beyond the village, pretty rural, not much going on. So really a very enclosed system that we've got here. Now, if we think about what that might look like, let's try and map that out. So if we're saying commerce was more personal, let's think what that would actually look like as a model. So here, mapping out, we've got the butcher, we've got the baker, we've also got the tailor here. And what each of them has is a situation in which they are producing the goods themselves, and they are also being able to produce goods which are tailored, and they'll have different products for each one. The butcher has different cuts of meat and may have different animals, different meats depending on what time of year it is. And the baker, they've got different breads, a lot of different breads here. Could be baguettes, could be small little dinner rolls. Really, they're baking whatever suits them, whatever really fits the order of the day. Tailor, likewise. Making individual outfits that really are customized for the folks that live in that area. So, another model as part of this, if we think back to that high street, is that actually you've got a model in which businesses rarely talk to their customers. And quite often that's because the business is a single individual, and what they are doing is they are both producing, and then when somebody walks in the door, they'll jump to the front of their business and they will start talking. So the baker will start a conversation with Mrs. Jones. Hey, Mrs. Jones, how's it going? I know that it's Friday and you love baguettes. We've just got these wonderful new baguettes. I just freshly baked. Go ahead, help yourself. Take a couple. And, oh, by the way, Mrs. Jones, I know that also your daughter's now dating that guy down the street, isn't he? They'll talk about all kinds of things could come up in these conversations, both related to the transaction and not. In addition to that, in this model, we'll think of our Western high street. What you would see as well is that customers would talk to their friends as Mrs. Jones walks out of the baker's. She engages Mr. Smith. Hey, Mr. Smith, how you doing? He's like, oh, good. I'm starving. Well, Smith, what you need to do is get yourself over to the baker. He's got some amazing, fresh, new baguettes. Try a little bit of mine. These are great. Mr. Smith said, wow, that's fantastic. I'll be there in a jiffy, or however they would have spoken in the Western world, in this Midwest US town. And what they would have done is they would have, they could have talked about all kinds of stuff, but at least a fraction of that may well have related to the commerce, to what's available, what's going on in terms of what you can buy, what's available in that particular small Western town. So that's the world as it was. So what's changed? And what did happen? What changed? This happened, that we moved to a world in which we had processes which allowed for mass production. And here, probably no surprise to many of you, but what we're looking at is the Ford Model T. And one of the early successes, what held up as an earlier champion of the era of mass production, what this allowed for was saying, okay, we can produce a lot of stuff very rapidly, which means it makes it much cheaper to produce. The caveat being that it has to be very similar. If we can optimize if we can say that we can produce a lot of these that are very close to each other that people want, then we will have a situation in which we can actually bring down the costs, and we can do it at scales that when we're reducing the cost means that it's available to more people. One thing I'll say about the previous model, we were talking about this Western model, is that it didn't necessarily scale that well. There would be folks, you could suggest that the society was more hierarchical in those times. There would be folks that just, well, actually, I know the baker's got great bread, but I don't have access to it. And by no means am I suggesting that we're now in a situation where all our resources are distributed equally to everybody. But one thing that mass production did allow for was the idea that more people could consume and be customers than we had previously. So we're moving on. Here we're moving on from the Ford Model T, which was early 20th century. If we're here now at the early 21st century, what we're seeing is that we've got this beautiful cars. This one you may recognize. This is the Tesla electric car being produced. So car manufacturing's really come in leaps and bounds in terms of what we can do and the way in which, look at this beautiful robotic automation that you can have to churn out these vehicles. So we have still these mass production processes, which even though the technology and what we're producing has evolved, largely some of the mass production, at least in this model, is still the same. It still has that same underlying themes to it. And what are those themes? That you can produce a lot of the goods and services for a given market as long as they are relatively similar. As long as, say, for instance, you have a production line process which can produce everything that's the same, and then that may have to work for a number of days or weeks or months, and then you can adapt it, but it takes some time to adapt, and that's where some of the cost comes. So if we're talking about an environment where we're trying to limit cost and increase scale, then the best way to do that is to produce a lot of things that are very closely related. So there's a couple of things that need to happen in order for this to be successful. If you can say, okay, well, we've got this model in which we can supply a lot of the similar stuff to people at great scale. We've got the supply bit worked out, but we do need to figure out the demand, how we create that. And this is where we saw, especially soon after, let's say, the Industrial Revolution started, we started to see this field of marketing emerge, driven by a few trends. One I'd suggest would be that we started to see mass consumption of media. So the idea that as well as we need to create demand, one way we can do that is actually leverage all these new media which are coming about. We've now got newspapers. We now have billboards where we can print a lot of adverts, and we can distribute those different parts of the country or the world, and we can just, we can have somebody that can slap them up with some paint and with some glue and a brush, and all of a sudden we can hit a whole village as opposed to going out and trying to talk to people individually. The other key facet that I'd like to point out is that also this idea of creating demand around segments or around products also emerged. The idea that, well, what we need to do is have people that have a preference for a particular car or model, and that's what they want because it's really is geared towards scope at which we can produce. So we need to have folks that all want to buy Model S's, in this instance the Tesla Model S, keeping with the Tesla story. And what we need to do is we can create demand for this particular model. If we're seeing a whole lot of these, or we've got this manufacturing process where we can produce, we need to create that demand. And a good way to do that is with segments, and to let people who have a strong interest and would want this to know that they can have this. But then in addition to that, also let other folks that may have and maybe it's an associated or related interest, to also map those folks to this particular interest so they can get this piece. But again, a lot of it's the idea of if we need to do this at scale, so we can build out this demand at scale. Now, if we go back to the way in which we might look at that model, on the right-hand side here, we've got a lot of these goods and services being produced, and what we would do is do some form of advertising or marketing around those goods and services. And then as we move to the left, we've got people that have different interests. And because we're doing this goods and services marketing at this segmented level, then folks can really start to fit into different segments, can say, okay, yeah, I associate with this one. I think I'd love that bread. Oh, I need that new orange top, etc. So we have that model. And in terms of another piece then that needs to be streamlined, so if we've got this idea that we've got a high level of supply working and we've got a high level of demand through the marketing, then in the middle of all of that is the sales process, the transaction, the way in which we bring those two things together so that supply meets demand. And for that to happen, we start to see a lot of automation and streamlining in the space. Here we're looking again using this Tesla model. They've moved away from a car showroom model, which we've seen where we'll have a lot of folks that would be set up in different towns to sell the individual cars. They've actually streamlined it further, and that they do most of the selling of their cars online. You go, you pick what you want. You can actually do a fair degree of customization there, and you can, they've got it's a rich interface where you can really look at what you're buying. But you go and make a purchase for something like a car online, which means they can scale very rapidly. They can offer this to multiple people buying at the same time. You don't have queues, and also you can offer this as a world model. You can localize it rapidly. You could have different language versions available, and all of a sudden you've got a model where the sales process is heavily automated and streamlined too. So what does that look like according to our model? Now we've got the complete picture. So we've got the heavy demand, we've got the heavy supply, and in the middle of this, we've got a degree in which we can have let's say a small number of sales folks be able to service a large number of customers. They can get a lot of these folks through. They can help them process a lot of goods very rapidly. And I'd say that this has largely fueled the degree to where we are now, where we live in an environment which is quite different to that Midwestern little town that we started with. Now we've got a model where we've got individuals that can interact with organizations across the world in different places at different times and be able to do it at a scale and be able to bring down costs as well. So all that's great, but what's changed? And in terms of what's changed, I suggest that there are certain things. If we look at, we've had two contrasting models now, and I've painted this very black and white. But what you could see is that that we had this one model which had certain advantages. Now we've got this other model, and what are some of those advantages? And it's brought on a whole new slew of advantages. But we've also got some things that have been lost, and a key part of that would be the social interactions and this idea of the degree of humanness that was taking place in commerce before. And so what brings that back? And that's where we get to social business. And once again, business is getting social. And in the social business model, we've got a model in which businesses can really both empower their employees to tell their stories, but can also be much more human and can engender a level of interaction that's on a much greater scale. And this is not just with customers. This is also with employees, with partners, across the whole ecosystem. And so, as part of that, for instance, here we can see a tweet from Tesla. It's one of their owners was able to locate a car by using their mobile app. Now, this is interesting. Somehow Tesla found out of this. Presumably it could have been through social, so the customer sharing this information. This turned into a news story. But then Tesla was able to share this in a way which it wouldn't have been able to do if it just ended at the news story. I don't know if you can see here, but we've got, there's almost 200 retweets on this piece, which was relatively recent. So people have been sharing this. People have been favoriting it, thinking this is a great story. And in that way, they've been sharing it with their own networks. So Tesla has been able to get the word out much more rapidly and in a way that it wouldn't otherwise be able to do using those, what we've been looking at in this mass production model. So following on from that thought is that markets become conversations. Your customers are out there. They're talking about you. They're talking with you. Here again, we're looking at Twitter. You can see that, for instance, for Tesla, for them, what it means is that they can actually interact in a level that just wasn't possible before. They're interacting, they're sharing information, but then also their customers are picking up and sharing that information. Here it is somebody that's not affiliated, at least directly, not somebody that's not being paid by Tesla, but what they're doing is they're talking about something, some innovations that Tesla's making, and this has been retweeted a number of times. And so you're seeing a degree to which we are having a way in which markets are becoming conversations. Back to our model, rather than just the big billboards, now what we have is we have individuals talking to the organization being able to talk back to individuals on a point-by-point, individual-to-individual basis. And we're also having a degree of which customers can talk to the customers can talk to the folks that may be new customers and are interested in buying. And so there is a lot more conversation happening, and markets, you can say, are driven more by conversation, less by old marketing ideas such as owning and conquering markets. Another facet that social business is bringing to the table is this idea of customers having many more points of interaction. So in the past, let's say with the mass production model, I think most of us may be familiar with the idea of sitting on a phone line waiting to speak to a call center representative, and we know it's only available Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and so we're hoping that we can get through to somebody before our life runs out. Whereas in this model with social business, now what we can see is a lot more points of interaction. Customers that can really engage in a way that wasn't feasible before. Here we're looking at Tesla's product forums and their site forums. And for instance, this is really a customer talking about, this is how you charge your car at night. This is what you need to set this up in your garage if you want to buy one of these cars. So how useful is this for somebody that's thinking of buying one of these cars, to see it as well directly from a customer, not just through the brochure, but to know that that this is probably more valid because it's come from somebody that's less biased in terms of when they share their message. And that's a key component that we're seeing in social, is this idea of authenticity and transparency. The idea that you can, if you're wanting to buy or you're wanting to engage with a brand, you can learn a lot more about the brand than you could ever before using these social technologies. In this case, it's a forum. It could just as well be Twitter. It could be Facebook or Reddit. Any other ways in which businesses can reach out and engage with customers and prospects, in which other customers can talk to each other. So, in terms of our model, what we're seeing is that the organization is becoming so much more porous. There are so many more interaction points that are available for customers and for prospects to meet and to talk and to carry on conversations with the organization. And we see something which we can sometimes call social CRM, or social customer relationship management, where other customer interaction may still be tasked with one particular function within the organization, the support function. But what we may also see is a situation in which other folks within the organization, could be in research, could be in development, but other people are actively engaged and told to be active with their customers. And another piece that we see is that information takes on a new role, and the way in which knowledge is shared both internally within the organization and across the broader organization changes. So here we're looking at an example of Tesla, where they put electric car patents into public. What they've done is they've taken out their blueprint for how they produce their cars, and they've open sourced that. So they've used social technologies such as wikis and blogs and other ways to share information about what was the formerly secret source to how they produce their cars, and they've made that available. Sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? But really, it does a few key things here. For them, and they stated as they put out this release, one of the things they're trying to do is drive the market for electric vehicles. And they see a key way of doing that is to be able to, they share the blueprints, the rest of the industry can pick up on those and can drive innovation and can start bringing more and more electric cars to market faster. Which, even though it will be, potentially their competitors, they see this as a way in which they can broaden a market space in which they currently have a leadership position. Another point here is that also Tesla can also allow innovation to happen much more rapidly. They may have a few thousand people involved in research and their own innovation, but now they can open that up and bring that over to many more individuals. So what we're seeing is that they can actually talk to and get feedback from a huge number of folks that might be interested and might be working in this particular field, and have some vested interest in sharing information about what they're doing. It could be new graduates that really want to, cement their position as being experts in this field, could do some development based on the innovation, the blueprints that Tesla shared. So that now that information really is driving productivity, information is a thing to be for a salesperson to try and hold on to with their Rolodex, but really organizations are pushing for that for internal collaboration, for information and knowledge sharing to happen both internally across the organization, as we've seen in examples like Tesla, also taking that broader as well, and sharing information more widely. And this, as well as, say, product innovation, you're seeing this in different ways. Another key way could be around the idea of the business processes and streamlining those. So information could be shared. For instance, if there is a large-scale baker that's using mass production, get bread out to the market, they may realize that, well, actually on different days of the week, we're seeing there's different demand for different types of bread. If it rains in a certain location, they need a special kind of bread. We're seeing more people buy certain goods and services based on the weather. All this information can be wrapped up and can be shared and delivered, and can be with collaboration. You can see that then the sales process and the sales function can now talk to the marketing function. The marketing function can talk to the finance function. There's a lot more sharing that can happen, and this idea of silos and information being held in different places, which keeps a lot of business owners up at night, can now be opened up using these social technologies. I suggest this is a huge area in which social business has a massive role to play. In terms of some of the key thoughts and some of the key areas here, just to touch on what this is affording business and what this is affording us as customers and citizens, is, let's start with A here, is the ability to build deeper relationships with customers. You can forge closer relationships. You can really get to know your customers can talk back to you. And then B here, you can gain better visibility with target audiences. You can figure out who you need to be talking to. You can get in front of them in a way which wasn't possible. You can do it in a way which is a lot more pinpointed than throwing up a huge banner ad. If, for instance, you're sharing information with their network, like Pinterest, for instance. You can better collaborate within the organization or within your overall ecosystem. So you can share across your different functions. You can share within teams. You can share with partners and with other individuals. You can build out these social networks and these capabilities and get people to engage in a way which wasn't feasible previously. And related to that is the idea that you can also manage talent and employee engagement. So the way in which an organization thinks of its employees and reaches its employees can be completely revamped. And I'd say almost we're seeing revolution in this space. So, for instance, a CEO or a senior executive can actually talk to an entire workforce who they may never, see in almost their entire work life, or at least on a very, very small base, a very small number of folks that they can interact with face to face. For instance, they can share a video on an intranet or through an internal social platform to engage the whole workforce, tell them what's coming up, what their key priorities are right now. You can also use these technologies to see who are your most engaged employees and which teams are most successful at terms of teaming based on looking at how they employ social technologies. And then moving on to E here is the idea that really culture is really of singular importance. You really need to have people engaging with these technologies for it to work. You need what we sometimes call social business adoption. The best way to drive that is to enable us to let them know how best they can use these platforms, when and where they should be using these platforms. So there's some governance and policy. And you can also enable them in terms of telling them, here's some information that you might want to share if you're wondering where to get started, or if you want to build up what you're currently sharing already. Here are some of our, here's a great blog by one of our customer advocates. There are different can enable your members and your employees and your partners for social sharing. And F, a crucial piece here is the idea that you can learn so much more. We've got so much more data-driven insights that can be gained in this social business model. sometimes get called social analytics, or social measuring social ROI, social intelligence. But in all these areas, what you can do is actually go a lot deeper into why you might want to engage in new market, whether there's market potential out there. You can measure if you are active, say on a network like Facebook or even something like Stack Overflow or GitHub. You can figure out, what's your market share? Have you increased your market share? Are you engaging with the right folks? Have you driven up participation in a way that wasn't available before? You can also learn a lot more about the actions that you're performing, as well as the business side. So you can see, okay, well, for all this interaction that we've just worked on, does that really lead to that many more tweets and clicks? And as you work through this process, and as you learn from doing this, what you should find is that you can have this much greater depth of information that's available about your organization. So before, business analytics mainly focused on financial and transaction and customer interaction data. Now you can add social data into that to know about what your prospects look like and who are the ones that are transacting most rapidly. And in another level, you can also then figure out whether you should engage in new markets in a way in the past you'd have had to do this through doing lengthy and time-consuming and also expensive market research. So huge demand there. But overall, social business is really transforming business in its entirety, not just through marketing, not just through reaching customers, but the whole gamut of which business operates. So we will be discussing this more in other sessions around this topic. So look out for more videos here and other presentations. But with that, I will sign off. This is Daryl Pereira, Caged Ether on Twitter. And if you want to keep up in the conversation, remember to use this hashtag SocBizS. Social Business Symposium is what this content's related to, and our hashtag is SocBizS. So I thank you all for listening. And with that, I say goodbye.